Employees are most often a company's most expensive resource, and from an IT security perspective, they're usually the biggest security risk. Oftentimes, this is not because they have sinister motives in mind, but because they simply aren't trained. Security awareness and training is the process of educating employees on computer security and good computing practices. Investing in education, such as what a phishing attack is and the ways to avoid falling victim to them, is typically covered as part of security awareness and training, and something we will focus on heavily today. My name is Brian Schrift, and I'm going to be providing your security awareness and training today. One of the first things I like to do is talk about Target. We're often giving these presentations for small and medium businesses, and I like using Target for two reasons. One is because they're the first breach that really got the nation's attention. This was back in 2013. Secondly is because not many people realize this, but a small business, a electrical contractor service, actually south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, pretty close to where we're headquartered, uh, was responsible for this breach. Well, they weren't early responsible, but they got infected and Target got infected through them. So I like using that example because we're talking about one of the biggest national breaches, and a contributing factor was a small business. So that lets us know how important small businesses are to the um, overall IT security in general, especially when you're dealing with or have relationships with larger organizations. So here are some of the topics we're going to be discussing today. We just did a little bit of an introduction there on security awareness and training. Next, we're going to be looking at what cybersecurity is. We're going to be taking a look at many of the various threats that exist against you and your organization. There's going to be a strong emphasis on phishing, since that is the #1 way organizations are being compromised today. We're going to take a look at threat mitigation, or reducing your threats. And finally, we're going to wrap up with a little bit of mobile security. So what is cybersecurity? First and foremost, the priority is to support the mission of the organization. So depending on what kind of organization, what industry you're in, cybersecurity should adapt to help your organization stay protected, stay secured, and operational. Security is a negative goal. That means it is 100% never attainable. You can't be 100% secure. Security is a continual process. I like to say to our clients, we continually improve things. We baby step, and we keep improving over and over and over again because, again, you can never be 100% secure. On the previous slide, we saw threat mitigation there. We're not stopping all of these security threats. We are mitigating, we are reducing the impact they have against your organization. So for example, if you were to be hit with a certain threat, instead of taking your organization out for 8 hours, maybe you only have a half hour of downtime. So again, security is a negative goal, never 100% attainable. So the level of security will vary based on your organization and a judgment. It's based on how tolerable you can be to risks. From a backup and disaster recovery perspective, this is a perfect example. We can put in backup and disaster recovery plans that back up data every 5 minutes. We can put up in plans that back up every hour, every 6 hours, or nightly. So think of those couple different options there. Which type of backup solution will be dependent on the risk tolerance of the organization. How much data can you lose? If you can't lose any, we want the 5-minute backup. If you can tolerate losing a day's worth of productivity, maybe the nightly backup will suffice. So again, it's a judgment based on the organization. And finally, you are the last line of defense. That's why we're having this class today. No matter how many safeguards, spam checks, filters, firewalls the IT department puts in place, there is someone out there that is working on the latest and greatest way to get around every one of those defenses. So you are our last line of defense. It's you who doesn't click that link you see in your email. It's you who doesn't go to that site that just looks a little bit off. So again, you are our last line of defense. So as IT professionals, we have various frameworks to work off of to secure and protect information systems, none of which you probably care about. What I want to point out here on the right, though, is simply what we refer to as the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So when looking at those three items, from your perspective and from our perspective, these are the things we're looking to protect: the confidentiality of your data. So we don't want people who shouldn't have access to your data to have access to your data, whether you're in healthcare, accounting, uh, legal, finance. If someone got into your bank account that shouldn't have, that's not a good thing, or your confidential healthcare record. Yeah, those are some bad things. When we talk about healthcare records, what if someone changed your medical record? Integrity. We don't want improper changes or alterations to occur to the data to or to your bank account. We don't want to show up one day and have a zero balance in there. And then lastly, there is availability. We always want the systems to be available so you're able to access that data when you need to. So again, this is more on us, but I wanted to give you a little bit of an understanding of what we're looking to do from an IT security perspective, from a cybersecurity perspective on keeping that data safeguarded. So why should an organization invest in security? Well, we just talked about on the backup scenario where if you lost a day's worth of data, what would that cost you? You'd have to recreate all that data, even if, and that's assuming that you could. If you're in an industry that has compliance or regulations, if you don't adhere to those, what happens? Do you get fined? Do you lose your contracts? Do you get shut down? Do you lose business? Again, there's additional cost. Breaches are up to $154 a record or $363 a record for healthcare breaches. That's very, very expensive to have a breach because you're usually talking of hundreds, if not thousands or millions of records that have been improperly accessed. Death. Ashley Madison, an adult married friend site based up in Canada. When it got breached, there were actually suicides because that information got out there and it ruined relationships and marriages. We talked about an altered healthcare record earlier. And then, of course, we get reputational damage. Target, Equifax, CCleaner is a popular tech product that just had a pretty significant hack. At the end of the day, you are responsible for protecting your customers, your clients, your own confidential information. It's essentially the right thing to do. If you're in healthcare, if you're in finance, if you're in accounting, or any industry or organization that collects and stores someone's personal information, you're responsible for protecting that. All right, so now we are going to start to look at some of the threats that are out there that attack both you and your organization. So I know this is a virtual training, but I'm hoping I got a couple grins and chuckles from on the other side of those monitors. I always like throwing this slide in our presentations to make sure everyone in the audience is awake, yourselves watching remotely included here. So I just want to comment, Russia has no specific threat against us. Threats come from everywhere. China, Ukraine, North Korea, you name it, we're getting attacked by it. But this is always a fun one to make sure everyone is awake and paying attention. So now that we know we're awake, we're going to dive into some of these threats. So again, think of that CIA triad, the things we're looking to protect. So you are helping us protect these things. So things that are going to try to attack those are going to be viruses, spyware, malware, ransomware. We've all probably heard of these items. There's a lot of web-based threats out there. We have email threats, which we're going to talk about here momentarily, social engineering, and different vulnerabilities. If you take in our security awareness and training course, you will notice that these two screenshots did not change, and that is because this is still happening today. Ransomware, very, very popular. And the role of ransomware is oftentimes through phishing. It will deploy a virus or malware that simply encrypts your data. It doesn't break your system. It doesn't typically crash your computer, things like that. It just locks up your data, so you are essentially useless. You can't do anything. You can't access your data. It's like opening up Word, but every single one of your Word docs is encrypted and essentially gone. And typically, they call it ransomware because they pop up a little ransom on your computer, and they say, pay us X number of Bitcoin, which is untraceable electronic currency, and we will give you the decryption key. So we will give you access back to your data. It's still advised not to do that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's varying statistics on that, but essentially, whenever you are hit with a ransomware attack, the best course of action is to ensure your systems are cleaned and then restore your data from a backup. So again, hopping back a couple slides, this is a perfect example of a way you can lose your data. So do we have 5-minute backups in place, or do we have nightly backups in place? So again, something to be mindful of. So there's all types of web-based threats out there. The more popular ones are pop-ups or windows that try to get you to click on them. They try to provoke an interaction. So it's like this Antivirus Pro 2017. It's a fake pop-up that makes you want to think it's a legitimate antivirus program and that you need to activate it now. So go ahead and click on me. Yeah, this isn't real. So the goal of this is to try to get you to click on something to download some malware, spyware, ransomware, things like that. So again, be very mindful of any sorts of screens or pop-ups that may appear whenever you're surfing the web. So there's no such thing as truly free online games. They're collecting something, whether it's personal information or they're essentially collecting something from you. The other thing is a lot of these free games aren't necessarily the best coded things in the world, so they could cause interference with other programs or end up causing a vulnerability on your system, things like that. And the other thing we want to be mindful of is you're using your organization's resources. So it's their computer, their internet, potentially their time. You probably want to stay away from online games. You may also or should have something in an employee manual that also relates to this. But again, just be mindful, online games, they are definitely not free. You're giving up something, and it's often privacy if you're engaging in them. Again, web-based threats, this is kind of a hybrid. Checking personal email. If you are at work and you're in your corporate email, hopefully your organization has all kinds of security measures and things like that to help filter out junk mail. If you're using a free service, and we'll pick on Yahoo simply because of the numerous data breaches we've seen in the news from them lately, they may or may not have all of those same security precautions in place. So again, when we talk about phishing, this is the #1 way of getting malware, essentially garbage, into your computer, into your organization. So if you're pulling that in, albeit not intentionally, from a outside source, such as a personal Yahoo, Gmail, or ISP provided email account, then you're opening up another threat or another way of phishing attacks into your organization. So again, you really shouldn't be checking personal email while at work. So we've all seen ads. Every website you go to seems like there's ad after ad after ad on it. I like telling this story because we traditionally do our security awareness or training renewals in the fall, and fall's football season. So I had a client, this was several years ago. He gave me a call first thing in the morning. He was frantic because he started getting all these pop-ups and it looks like his computer was infected. And he was like, Brian, I swear the only thing I did was I went and I logged in, I checked my fantasy football this morning. So this was a Monday morning. And sure enough, the fantasy football site just pulls in ads from third-party ad services. And they can't vet these things. So, and half the time they don't even know what ads are being displayed. So again, just something to be mindful of, that not all, even good service providers can can have a moment of vulnerability, such as this Forbes screenshot here. So again, just something else to be mindful of when surfing the web and clicking, especially clicking on ads. Again, we want you to be very mindful of where you're clicking on, and you should be surfing sites that are a little more reputable than others. All right, so now we're getting into the good stuff, phishing. So this is one of, I hate reading slides. This is one of these slides in every presentation I give. I read and I point to. So this is what phishing is. This is the definition of phishing. Phishing is an email attack in which an attacker masquerades as a trusted source, sending fraudulent emails in an attempt to elicit personal information from the recipient in order to gain access to their digital life. So essentially, you are being tricked, trusted source, via email, and they want you to give up something. That could be a username, a password. They could get you to click on something, and the ultimate goal of phishing is to gain access in some manner. So again, this is the definition of phishing, and very, very important. So here's an example of a awful phishing email. And no, I'm not picking on Target. Think of it as maybe one of those things when you were in grade school and you always picked on the girl you liked. So definitely not picking on Target here. It just happened to be an actual email that I had received. So there's just so many red flags with this. There's no way in the world anyone with any common sense should click anywhere on this email. So again, this is an awful example. Most likely, there is not a Nigerian prince that is trying to wire you money. You also probably don't have thousands of dollars coming back to you from the IRS for improper tax filings of some sort, and you most likely don't have a long-lost relative that is their estate is trying to find you to send you money. So again, those are some just examples of awful phishing that you should not fall victim to. So here's another example of a pretty bad phishing email. The only reason I'm going to show this, or that I like to show this, especially from the central Pennsylvania area, is Jari is a local business organization. So what this phishing attempt is doing, it's a little more targeted, and it's impersonating a trusted organization. So again, back from that phishing definition we looked at earlier, a trusted source. So they're hoping that even though this is a awfully designed phishing email, that they're going to trick someone into clicking on the link. And again, I say this is a pretty bad example because of the email address and some random website that's taking you to who knows where. The good, I guess, the positive things about if I was the fisher here, I used a legitimate person and I used a legitimate local organization. So not only did this fisher use Jari as the organization, but they also had Nikki's first and last name. Again, the email address goes, or the website address goes off to some random website, and there's no HTTPS. So again, you're thinking invoicing, it should be secure, all that fun stuff. And then the general Jari PTAC at the bottom, which again, legitimate, but, or I should say at least looks legitimate. But again, a pretty bad example of the phishing email. Okay, so a little bit of history on email. Email was invented back in 1972. POP3, which you'll see in this screenshot from my Outlook 2016, in 1988. So it's basically 30 years old. So we are using 30-year-old technology to pretty much conduct a ton of business every day. Back then, the kind of security threats that we're looking at today just didn't exist. So again, that's kind of something to think about whenever we consider, oh, well, email is so easy to spoof and all that fun stuff. Just looking at the example here, I could simply put in any name and email address I wanted as my user information, and as long as I had a valid server and a valid login, my email would be sent as if I'm Bill Gates. So That's pretty much how easy it is to send a fraudulent email, and it's up to your email provider to look for those kinds of irregularities and block it. But just a really quick history lesson on email, and a little reminder that we are using a 30-year-old technology to conduct a whole lot of business nowadays. All right, so here's another example of a phishing email. Again, not a great example, but we wanted to highlight this one because it looks like a educational institution's email account was compromised. So eventually, S. Staler at desu.edu, it appears their email account has been compromised, and they were sending email on behalf of Drake Software, which is a popular accounting package. One of our accounting clients sent me on over this example. So again, it was slightly targeted in the fact that it was from Drake Software. So again, they're trying to get that trust factor going on. And also, since it's from a big educational institution, it most likely made it through a lot of the anti-spam checks, because they're not typically going to be sending phishing emails like this unless, of course, they have someone who's compromised. But again, the items that are red are indicators that this is a phishing attempt. So these are our red flags. So some educational institution is trying to send email on behalf of Drake Software. There's the educational footer in the bottom, which is appended, and again, kind of gives you that red flag because it's not Drake Software. And then, of course, lastly, if you leave your mouse hover over the unlock link, it'll display where it's sending you, and it's routing you off to some Brazilian website. So again, not a great example of phishing, but one of the reasons why it's making it into our inbox is because a legitimate organization has been compromised. So if you visit our website, www.precisionbs.com, and up top in the search bar, just search for phish, you will see several examples of phishing emails. So we post these regularly just to, again, keep everyone mindful that the different types of phishing attacks continue to evolve, and we're going to talk about fax phishing that you see here a little bit later. But again, just to keep security on the top of everyone's mind. So now we're going to look at a pretty good phishing email. So this came into our support account. LogMeIn is a very popular remote access program, and one that we have subscribed to and do use. So there is this very nicely crafted email. Talks about legitimate security concerns. Automate the updating of third-party applications is now mandatory if you're using LogMeIn. And number one there shows a link to LogMeIn. The logo is in there. There's not a whole lot of broken English. There's some good formatting. So this looks like a very good email. It looks like it could be legitimate. That being said, let's take a look at some of the reasons why it's not. All right, so the biggest red flag is the email address. Of course, some random Japanese email address is sending us email on behalf of LogMeIn. So there's our big red flag. So right off the bat, that should immediately trigger a delete. But what's kind of slick about this is if you look at that email, it's HTTPS, so there's the good thing that it's an encrypted website, so that's good, it's secure. But then if you really take a tight look at the address, it's secure.logmein.net instead of secure.logmein, which is .com, but .net is still very, very plausible. So again, that's a pretty tricky website address, and they lay it all out there for you, so it's not like it's hidden or anything like that. So again, very, very slick on this one. So this is a pretty good phishing email. All right, so we just looked at a pretty good phishing email. Now this is a scary good phishing email. So this is from one of our clients. This is an email going from Sally to Yvonne. And when you look at this email, everything looks pretty darn good. It's from Sally.Westover. It's going to Yvonne. It has Sally's signature block in there. But when Yvonne got this, something just didn't feel right. So an account, of course, Yvonne is in the accounts payable. So she would be one who would be stroking checks. But again, something just didn't feel right about this email, which caused Yvonne to follow up, which absolutely kudos to Yvonne on this, because again, this is a very good looking email. So this is why I say this email is scary good. We'll take a look at the from up here. So if we take a look at Sally's email address, if you really take a look at it, and this is a very, very targeted attack. So Eastern Elevator, EASTERN. The R and N is actually, in this example, an M, but you can barely tell that. So again, scary good how a phisher registered and used a domain name with an address that had a RN in it to turn it into an M. Very, very slick. Secondly, the signature block. Sally had recently changed it, so they were using a somewhat old but still very valid signature block from Sally. So that's the signature block is in green. So the person who perpetrated this phishing attack not only was good from a domain perspective with the R and the N, but also managed to have a copy of one of Sally's emails from prior. Again, if we did a little bit of digging in the background on this one, and it was legitimately hosted with Google, they had Gmail service with this domain. So again, a pretty good and scary targeted phishing attack. So then again, that's why we say kudos to Yvonne on this, because it just something didn't seem right to her on this request. So here's another example of a slightly targeted email. This is an email allegedly from myself to Matt Schutte, who takes care of accounts payable in our office. So the challenge with this one is that since he's looking at it on a mobile device, he doesn't see the full email address. He just sees Brian Schrift, because on a mobile device, screen real estate is at a minimum. So they typically don't show all the detail on the email address. So when you look at this, it looks like, hey, it's from Brian Schrift, it's to Matt. Hey, you in the office, I need a payment sent. This looks, again, pretty good, but Matt realized a couple red flags on this one. In particular, that I don't really speak like that, and I often say please in emails, and I don't know that I've ever really used the word kindly in an email like that. So the phrasing and Matt knowing how I speak and how I send emails also plays into your interpretation of an email, or in this case, your interpretation of a phishing email. So other than my not often requesting things like this, Matt's red flag was kindly. It's just not a word I use in conversation or an email. I also use the word please a lot, so that was another word that was missing whenever I send a request. If you take a look at this, if you clicked on the Brian Schrift from up there, he would see that the email address in the background was office@billpeters.org, which is just simply a compromised email account. So in this example, him looking at it on a mobile device made it significantly harder to distinguish phishing, because it didn't display the email address, which would have been a pretty big giveaway. Now, if he would have communicated back and forth, then the office@billpeters.org could have then sent some follow-up information about where the payment was to be sent, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, these kinds of attacks are successful, especially whenever you consider that in this instance, so many people use mobile phones, and when viewing emails on a mobile phone, you don't have all of the resources available that you do when you're looking at it, say, on Outlook or something along those lines. And then just to mix up phishing a little bit, here is what we'll just simply call fax phishing. So again, they're phishing for information. They're trying to get you to give up information. Now, they faxed us asking us to provide some reference information for a client of ours. And I've seen these a couple times before and have filled them out on behalf of a client. And again, what they're trying to do is gather more information. In this case, they're probably looking to gather specifics so they can call, say, Ebensburg Borough here and pretend to be us. maybe social engineer them and kind of trick them to maybe diverting a payment to them instead of us or something along those lines. So again, phishing comes in various forms, and at the end of the day, they're again trying to be that trusted source to solicit information and of course get you to give it up. So last year, Kevin and I were talking, and it's one of those things where sometimes people think that it doesn't happen to them. So we decided that, you know what, let's do a phishing research study. So we were talking about it, and we decided that we wanted to phish our clients to see how vulnerable they were, so we could again enhance our training and make sure that their staff attend security awareness and training like this. So we were hashing out, we were thinking of maybe phishing as a bank or something like that, but we said, we don't want the FBI windbreaker showing up at our doorstep. So we decided to phish as us. So we're going to walk through our phishing research study on how we would target our clients if we were going to be phishing them. So step one, trusted source. We registered the domain name precisionbs.tech. After all, we're a tech company. If you got an email from precisionbs.tech or went to a precisionbs.tech website, that would seem plausible. We registered it on GoDaddy. We paid for hosting it on GoDaddy. We purchased a SSL certificate so we could have proper encryption on our website. And we purchased an Office 365 email account. All in told, we probably spent $100 on putting all these things together. All right, so step number two, the ask. So we crafted an email that, again, would sound plausible. We didn't say that we were a Nigerian prince wanting to wire them money, or that we were the IRS with an heir on their taxes and all this other fun stuff. So what we did is we looked for something of value to them. So if we're phishing ourselves, we're their IT company. So we're their trusted IT provider. So it would make sense that, hey, we're upgrading our help desk system in an effort to provide you better service. So please register your convenience so we can speed things up. So again, we're asking them to do something, to take an action that will benefit them. Then we added in a sweetener. Look at that red line. Register before May 1st and you might win a $100 Sheets gift card. That was, again, an enticer to get them to not only register, but register now. Because of course, who doesn't want to win a $100 Sheets gift card? So step three was building the fraudulent website, which would collect all the usernames and passwords we were asking for. So again, you come to this page and you see the $100 Sheets gift card, you see your name, company, email, username, password, and it looks like our website because it is, it's a copy. You can download a copy of anyone's website and make a fake page like this pretty easily. In our instance, what we did is we not only built this fake page, but we built in a ton of logic and things like that in the background. So for starters, passwords were never actually transmitted to us, and we tracked every person. So again, we could do a statistical analysis and find out additional information, and that's where Kevin and the whole research part comes in at. But again, it's really easy to build a fake website like this. And we have some more examples that show just how easy it is coming up. Another part of step three on that website build was that SSL certificate we mentioned earlier. So basically the SSL certificate allows us to do everything securely and using encryption on the website. So if you were to click that link, go to our website, everything looks good, you'd also get this essentially green thumbs up in the corner letting you know that, hey, this is a secure and encrypted connection. So again, we're building that trust factor because again, we're about to ask you for your username and your password. And here were the results. We sent out almost 1,200 emails. Those emails, almost 500 people clicked on the link. So they interacted with that fake fraudulent email in some way, shape, or form. So that's 41% of people clicked that link. Now that link could have taken them somewhere nasty, such as a site that would try to infect their system with viruses, spyware, things like that, instead of taking it to our website form. Once they got to our website form, almost 13% of the people gave us usernames and passwords. Now we don't know if it was the actual username and the password to their system because we didn't validate it or save it or anything like that, but they gave us a username and a password. in talking to clients afterwards, some people who fell for the phishing email, they had said that they thought they were creating a new account and it was a different password, or some people said it was a password that they used but not their work password, because again, one of our issues with passwords is we don't like changing them up all that often. So we kind of tend to stick to the same ones and cycle them throughout our various systems as they start to expire. So again, we had a almost 13% success rate with our phishing email. So why were we so successful? Part of the reason is because we took our time, we researched, and we built a very legitimate phishing attack. Here's a conversation I had with one of my friends, and she mentioned that she uses the password on a lot of things, though. I said, exactly. She asked, what should she do? I said, nothing. It was never transmitted. It was fake. But look right there in the middle. I was hoping I would win the Sheets gift card. So one of those things where there's that added benefit for you because you get faster and better IT service, there's also that chance that you won the gift card. So essentially, we were using some pretty good bait in the phishing research study. So this is how easy it is to do what we did. We go out to GoDaddy, we type in a domain name of someone we're looking to attack from. So Ameriserve, a local bank here, and Ameriserve.com is taken, but look at all these other Ameriserves that I can get for $7.99. I can be Ameriserve.org or Ameriserve.us for $1. So again, it's this easy to get a domain that is completely legitimate and for an attacker to craft a phishing attack from. So here's an example of Ameriserve's online banking website. Or is this our online banking website? So we have two online banking websites that look pretty darn similar. The website on the right is the actual Ameriserve online banking website. The website on the left is a website we created in about 3 minutes. So again, I mentioned earlier how quick and easy it is to create a fake website. It took us 3 minutes to create that. If we would have spent another 2 more, we probably would have gotten the more rounded edges with the username and password on the login boxes. So why would someone want to create a website like this? Well, if I was attempting to phish you and get you to give up credentials from Ameriserve, what I would do is I would create this fake website. I would phish you in an attempt for you to go there. If you were to go there and put in your username and password and click login, I would then redirect you to the real Ameriserve website. So why would I do this? Because you would put in your username and your password, you would click login, and then you would be prompted for it again. You think, oh, it must not have taken and blah, blah, blah. You type it in and boom, you're in and none the wiser. Meanwhile, I've collected your username and password off of the fake website. This is why a lot of websites and logins are going to a system where you put your username in on one page, then you click OK or next or whatever they have you click, and then you put your password on the next page. This is also why they're doing a lot of multi-factor authentication. So they have to email you a code or text your cell phone or things like that. Because again, if your username and password is compromised, then anyone can go in and log in as you. What if you did that? I logged in as you, and then I started transferring off some money, this, that, the other thing. That second layer, that multi-factor, or that click from one page to the next, again, helps mitigate threats, helps reduce that risk. So again, IT security, we're trying to remove risks from someone being able to log into your online banking website that isn't actually truly you. So we spent a good amount of time on phishing, which is time well spent because phishing is the #1 threat out there. But now we're going to shift gears. We're going to talk about social engineering. Social engineering is when an attacker tries to manipulate you into divulging confidential or personal information. That information can then be used for fraudulent purposes or to create an attack on your organization. Some things to be mindful of: delivery men, if they're dropping off a package and they're walking around the office, things like that. Repairmen may not actually be repairmen. Interviewees can be there to gather information about your organization. For an example, if I was applying for an IT security position or just any IT position in general, I would ask some questions like what kind of defenses do you have and this and that. And that technical information would let me know where to start to try to attack their organization. With phone calls, you can actually spoof phone numbers. And I'm sure many of you, it's getting unfortunately more popular now, but phone calls are made and they appear to be local and things like that. I can also program my phone to essentially be any phone I want to. Whenever we do these live presentations, I will get a audience volunteer in the beginning. I'll ask them for their significant other or better half's cell phone number. I'll program it into my phone as if it's theirs, and then during the presentation I'll call them. On their cell phone, it'll look like their wife or their husband is calling them. So that is social engineering through phone call spoofing. So I'm going to tell a story now that kind of relates to social engineering from a repairman perspective. As you'll see to the right, this is my photo in a fake Atlantic Broadband identification card. I ended up just picking their colors because it kind of matched ours, and because Atlantic Broadband is one of the only ISPs in the area, so essentially every business has Atlantic Broadband. So if I'm going to try to fake a social engineering repairman attack, this could be a way that I would get myself in the door if I was wearing a nice polo or maybe a button-down shirt, had this little ID card on, then maybe I can get in the front door and gain access to their IT systems. So keeping that in mind, one of our IT professionals, Mark, he was heading down to a client to install a new firewall. They had been having some internet issues, and the firewall was pretty old, and it was determined to be faulty, so we were going to replace that. So he walks up to the front door, walks in, identifies himself and Precision Business Solutions with the secretary, and she leads him back to the data closet where the server and all their networking equipment is. He sits down, and after a couple minutes, he realizes he's at the wrong address. So he walked into the front door, identified himself, and after all, who doesn't want faster internet? So if he's there to identify himself and say, hey, I'm Mark from Precision Business Solutions, I understand you've been having some internet issues and I'm here to upgrade your firewall. Who isn't going to take him back? And hey, I want faster internet, of course, here, let me show you the way. Unfortunately, that wasn't our client. So from that organization's perspective, if Mark wanted to be malicious or deviant, he could have been back there for, I'd say, quite some time, and he could have done anything he wanted to. He could have installed monitoring hardware, he could have got on servers or computers, or he could have done a whole array of things that could completely have compromised that organization's IT system. So again, while an accident and inadvertent, we were able to basically have full reign of someone else's IT systems, physically on site, right in their office. So vulnerabilities are essentially bugs or flaws in computer code. This can apply to both hardware, such as firewalls or switches or access points, but also, and what gets the most press, is software. So Patch Tuesday for Microsoft, Windows, Java, and Flash are known for vulnerabilities, and there's updates to those software regularly. If you don't patch and update your hardware and software, then those vulnerabilities may be able to be exploited, which then could allow an attacker to gain unauthorized access into your systems. So here's an example of why patching vulnerabilities is so important. In the latest Equifax hack, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, hack to date, an intruder was able to penetrate their web server because it was missing a patch from a known vulnerability. While this vulnerability was only released 2 months prior, if the patch for it was in place, then Equifax may have avoided this pretty big data breach. And yes, my data was compromised as part of the Equifax breach. So we just talked a lot about all the scary stuff that's out there on the web, all the different ways and methods of attacking you in your organization to try to get at your information. So now we're going to shift gears completely, and we're going to talk about ways to mitigate or reduce those threats. So I really hope this isn't your organization's IT security plan. While we did just cover a lot of scary stuff and all the threats that are out there, at the end of the day, you are responsible for, again, keeping your own data, your client's data, your customer's data, keeping that data safe and protected. So we're going to talk through some of the ways that you can do that at your organization. So let's take a look at your home. Let's apply IT security to your home. So here's a nice home pictured here. I'd assume this has some door locks. It might have a security system. There's smoke detectors. You can install a fence. You could have an insurance policy to help compensate you if bad things happen. So those are all defenses that you have to keep your home and keep what's in your home, your family, protected. So we want to take that same concept and apply it to your IT systems. We want your organization's IT security to resemble a castle. We want it to be near impenetrable for someone from the outside to get in unless you roll out the drawbridge for them. So again, we're going to talk about some of the defenses that we put in place, which, as we see in the slide, defense in depth or layered defenses. So again, every defense we put in place is one more thing an intruder has to get through. Just like breaking into your home. First, they'd have to pick the lock. Then they'd have to disable your alarm. Then maybe there's an alarm system, or maybe you have a nice little guard dog there. So again, each defense is something that the intruder has to take into consideration and figure out a way to get around. And what's easiest for an intruder? How about going to your neighbor next door who doesn't quite have as many defenses as you do? So we'll start off with something that everyone should be very familiar with and have on their systems, and an antivirus or an anti-spyware program. While you're not the IT folks or the IT security professionals, you should have a basic understanding of the antivirus system in place at your office, even if only it's to make sure that you don't accidentally click a box that says update or something along those lines. So again, an antivirus or an anti-spyware program is important. A lot of them provide additional protections like a web shield or a firewall to, again, help keep you protected and safe online. Another thing is your firewall. Although nowadays a firewall just doesn't cut it. What you truly need is a network security appliance. Essentially what this is it's a firewall with all this extra security stuff built into it. So for example, it will do antivirus and spyware detection. It will protect you from hacking. It can block malicious websites or just unproductive websites like Facebook. It could stop and prevent botnet attacks and also block access from countries that you don't do business with. If you don't have anyone traveling outside the US that has to gain access to your systems, then why are you even letting foreign countries attempt to access? So it should be blocked right at that firewall level. So again, a network security appliance is really what organizations need to be moving towards. The simple built-in firewall in your Comcast cable modem just isn't cutting it anymore. So the reason we just took a look at the Norton Core is because this is a residential firewall, and granted, you shouldn't be using these at your business, but this is more for your home. But it is a good example of one of the few network security type appliances that are made specifically for residential. So here's a little comparison. So standard Wi-Fi router, which is your general basic cable modem with your firewall in it. When you look at Norton Core, that's going to be more along the lines of a network security appliance. So again, going through that firewall or going through that device, it's protecting you against viruses, it's safeguarding your identity. There's some on-the-go protection stuff that's kind of geared towards home use parental controls, similar to content filter, block bad sites. So again, The network security appliance gives you that more robust security at your front door. Again, this is the device that is putting up the brick wall between the internet and your corporate network with all this sensitive company information on it. So it's very important, and it's a great first line defense that you can use to safeguard your systems. Modern web browsers have more and more security built into them to help protect you while surfing online. So please be mindful of the warnings and alerts issued. If your browser is attempting to block you from going to a website, it's most likely for a cause. Also, be on the lookout for the green lock, which indicates a secure connection to the website you are browsing. If you do not have a green lock, as pictured in this slide, you do not have a secure connection to that website. So who still knows of someone who writes their password down on a Post-it and sticks it under their keyboard, maybe the top desk drawer, hopefully not on the front of their monitor? There's nothing really good about that. Other things to look at when you're looking at a clean desk type of policy is your computer or your workstation in a public area? Is it somewhere where someone could kind of stand right next to you and read some things off your screen that maybe they shouldn't be able to read? Maybe if you're at a counter, is the monitor facing away from them? There are privacy screens that you can purchase to put on a monitor that will distort you from being able to look at that at an angle, which kind of helps protect privacy. You'll see those a lot in hospitals, in healthcare organizations, things like that. Also, on your desk, is there anything sensitive laying out that shouldn't be? What if you're working on a project and you have all these documents spread out on your desk, and the next day you're out sick, and maybe there's a tour or whatever? You have all this sensitive information sitting there when someone could be walking by your desk. Hey, maybe it was marked upgrading a firewall, and easily can see or have access to that confidential information that they shouldn't have access to. So now we're going to briefly talk about a backup and disaster recovery plan. Why briefly? Because I could probably spend 2 to 3 hours talking about this. A backup and disaster recovery plan is one of the top things an organization needs to consider in terms of IT security. Why? Because incidents will happen. There will be data loss. It's not a matter of if, but when. And when that happens, your organization needs to be able to recover. Whether that be recovering one file that maybe a team of people worked on, to recovering an entire server that had a massive hard drive failure, maybe a really big electrical surge wiped it out. There's so many different ways that data can be destroyed. It's important that you have a way to get that data back. The first thing is that we don't feel that a data backup is good enough anymore. So we want all of our clients to be on an image backup type of program. So essentially a data backup just backs up data. So it safeguards data only. So in the event of a crash, the simplest explanation is we rebuild a server or a system from scratch. We reinstall the programs, we recustomize everything, we reinstall the printers, get all the margins set up, and then we put your data back and you're good to go. That takes a lot of time, especially if it's a server. That could take 40, 50, 60 plus hours. An image backup backs up your data, but it backs up the entire server as well. It takes an image of the entire thing. This is critical because if something bad does happen and your server needs to be rebuilt, instead of spending 40, 50, 60 hours rebuilding that server, you can restore it in an hour or two, maybe even as little as 5 minutes. And everything is exactly the way it was before the incident occurred. On-site and off-site, we need both. Typically, the way we set things up is our on-site backup retains data for 30, 60, 90, 100 plus days. So we can go back many, many weeks, many, many months to retrieve data that may have been corrupted or deleted. An off-site backup is more for a disaster. So that's critical that off-site we have, again, still an image, but we don't retain as much. We may retain a day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, something along those lines. Because if you lose a file or a folder or something along those lines, or even if a hard drive fails in your server, we're going to be able to restore that from the on-site backup. But if your on-site location is truly destroyed, whether it be a fire, flood, theft, then we have our offsite image backup, and again, can get you back up and running very, very quickly, as opposed to building everything from scratch. We also recommend computer image backups. Why? For the same reason as server images. If your computer, which is far more likely to have an issue or crash or things like that, because they get toted around a lot more, you're using them daily, you're clicking around online, and if it's a laptop, maybe they're being tossed around. So again, computers and laptops are a little more susceptible to failure, where they would need to be repaired or Windows reinstalled. Do you really want to go through reinstalling Windows, reinstalling all your software, then getting all that customization done just to the way you like it? Computer image backup, very, very cost effective. And in the event that your computer or system crashes, then everything can be restored from backup, from the image. So it's like nothing bad ever happened. And ultimately, that's what we want in a backup and disaster recovery plan. Lastly is the yearly test. We cannot consider a backup and disaster recovery plan complete until it's tested. Why? You need to ensure it works. We can't just hope that the report that we get says it works and there's no issues or anything like that. We need to make sure it truly does work. The other thing is, if you do a full restoration, a full test, then you know how long it takes for that recovery process to occur. If you're in a critical industry where you can't be down for more than 5 or 6 hours, or each hour you're down might cost you $10,000 or $15,000, well, that's a problem. You don't want to have any downtime, but in the event that something bad happens, you want to be able to be restored and up and running as quick as humanly possible. And that's where the image backup with proper planning and testing comes into play. So here's something to think about when you're considering a backup and disaster recovery plan. Now, I like to pick on CPAs due to tax season, and everyone knows that CPAs work crazy hours during tax season. So they're always fun to use for this example. So let's say we have 10 CPAs who are billing out at, say, $100 an hour, and during tax season, they're only working 10 hours a day. Well, those 10 CPAs are cranking out 10,000 billable hours. Odds are they're doing it on a computer. Odds are, if you only have a nightly backup and your systems crash before the backup runs, you just lost $10,000 because they're going to have to redo all that work. So by you only having a nightly backup plan, if something bad were to happen, then you would have lost an entire day's worth of work, or in this instance, $10,000. What if you had 20 CPAs? What if you had 50? So that's how quickly you can start to value a good backup and disaster recovery plan. Because again, bad things will happen. And what we're doing with a good backup and disaster recovery plan is mitigating the effect. So we're reducing your downtime. We're saving you money by your CPAs not having to redo all that work. So when we start looking at some of the policies and procedures that many organizations have in place to protect IT systems and data, primarily they're kind of grouped into two different types, technical or administrative. If we look at the technical, these are going to be some policies such as an account lockout policy, where if your account is attempted to be logged into repetitively with the wrong password, you'll be temporarily locked out. This is useful to protect against brute force attacks where someone is just randomly guessing passwords to complement your username. Password change policies, where every 60, 90, 120 days you have to change your password. And then, of course, finally, the screensaver policy. So if you walk away from your computer and you leave it unattended and forget to lock it manually as you should, the screensaver policy will kick in and require a login to access that system. So now we're going to take a look at some of the administrative policies that many organizations will have in place. An important one is a employee termination policy. So whether someone leaves on good or bad terms, we need to make sure that that account is shut down, disabled or deleted, to ensure that they can no longer access information systems of the organization. An acceptable use policy is a pretty foundational document many organizations have in place. Highly recommended, and it kind of sets the foundation of what is and isn't acceptable for use in using the organization's IT assets. So, for example, do you allow your employees or staff to surf Facebook or other social media sites, check personal email where they could be introduced to phishing on company resources, on a break, over lunch, things like that. That's something to be very mindful of because, again, phishing, all the malware, all the junk out there, and if you're surfing those sites on corporate resources, it introduces additional risks that you most likely don't have throughout the course of your normal day working with those systems. Bring your own device policy, very, very important. I always like telling the story. So BYOD is simply you're using a personal device to do work. So that personal device could have access to email, other sensitive data, things like that. And there's going to be a fine line between personal and work use. So we're kind of in this gray area here. So many organizations, you'll hook your iPhone, your Android phone up to corporate email. Even then, all that sensitive information that's traveling over your corporate email gets saved on that device that the organization does not have ownership of, does not necessarily have control over. However, typically the organization can wipe that device. And again, not many staff or employees know that. So there's this gray area of understanding. Additionally, what if that phone is lost? What if it's stolen? Now you have a personal device with corporate confidential sensitive information on it that is lost or stolen. So everyone's not having a good day right now. So what happens if the organization says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and push a wipeout on that device since you've lost it, and then all of a sudden you find it the next day in the couch cushion. Then you discover it's been wiped, and the last 5 years of your child growing up is on that phone because no one uses cameras anymore. They use their phone to take pictures. And of course it's not backed up. So now there's a big issue or some hurt feelings, things like that, because we have to keep in mind the security needs of the organization, but knowing full well that it's a personal device. So again, a BYOD policy is essentially a policy to give understanding to both the employee and the organization. Hey, if you want to use your personal device to do work, great, but we have some security considerations. And again, it puts everyone on the same page, and it might be one of those things where the employee elects not to because of the different measures involved and what can and can't happen. But again, that's a really important one, especially because, again, nowadays everyone's life is to a point on their smartphone, good or bad, it's there. Social media policy, also referred to by me as the common sense policy. If you post something online, it is permanent. Delete doesn't actually really truly delete. Other things to keep in mind on social media: selfies. A lot of people love selfies for whatever reason. They like taking them at work and at the gym. And if you're taking selfies at work, you have a very powerful camera on your smartphone, and it captures all that information in the foreground. So you want to be sure that there's nothing, say, behind you, maybe if you're in a hospital, some patient data behind you or a patient, things like that. So again, you need to be very mindful when taking pictures, because if I took a picture of my desk, I could probably zoom in on it and read all of the text that are on the documents laying there. And lastly, we have the cyber insurance policy. This is an insurance policy that protects your organization in the event you suffer a breach. So any organization that maintains or stores personal information, whether that be PII, PHI, you should definitely have one of these policies in place. No matter how many safeguards, how many security measures, all that fun stuff we've just talked about, no matter how much you have, there's always going to be a risk because there's no silver bullet. You can never be 100%. So the cyber insurance essentially protects you on that worst case scenario kind of event occurring, which is a breach and a loss in your data. So this is typically a exclude on a general liability policy. It's an add-on. So I recommend that every organization that has confidential data discuss this with your insurance provider. So Kevin at the office loves this slide. Every time we do security awareness and training, this is his go-to. So I'm not going to do you justice, Kevin, so I apologize now. From a password policies perspective, when you're changing your passwords, please be mindful that they do not have to be crazy things. You don't have to make these weird gyrations with your hands on your keyboard using all the different characters that are out there. That doesn't necessarily make a secure password. The two things you want to be mindful of when selecting a password is its objective is to do two things. It's to fool a person and it's to fool a computer. So my house is the color red. Well, that's not really going to fool a person if they know that your house is the color red and they see a couple words that you're typing in, things like that. You can kind of get those things, and that lessens the strength and security of the password. My house is the color dog. Again, it doesn't make sense to a person, and the length of it will fool a computer simply because it has so many characters in it. And that's what the chart off to the right is kind of describing here. It's going to take 47.03 trillion centuries to try to crack, using current technology, trying to crack the password, my house is the color dog, exclamation point. So think of password phrases, something simple that's easy to type with your hands, something that are words you're using every day, but again, to fool a person. So my son's name is Johnny. Again, if your son is named Johnny, probably not the best password in the world, and that's why they say, hey, don't use phone numbers, birth dates, things like that as passwords, because again, you're not fooling the person. Someone can find that out about you. So again, password policies, key takeaway, they don't have to be nuts. They should be phrases to fool a computer, and they should not necessarily make complete sense to fool a person. A few slides ago, we saw under password policies a note about multi-factor authentication, and we didn't talk about it because we have this slide to do just that. So multi-factor authentication essentially means that we're using multiple factors to authenticate you, to allow you to log into the system. You also see this as 2FA or two-factor authentication because two of the three are in use. So let's take a look at those three. So a password is something you know, so that's one of the factors. Something you have is another factor, so that could be something like the YubiKey pictured in the photo here. It could be a smart card type of device. It could be a cell phone, because a lot of systems have apps now that you can use an app on a cell phone to generate the second code or a text message to that cell phone. And finally, it's something you are. So fingerprint readers, iris scanners, retina scanners, Windows Hello, where they kind of do and the Apple Face, where they do the face recognition to prove that it's you. So those three factors, essentially, you pick two of them for multi-factor authentication. You'll see a lot of banks switching to this type of system, and even just general websites switching to this type of system for security, because you put in that password, which hopefully hasn't been recycled and hopefully isn't the same password that you use on every other site, and then you have to get that text message or open that app or do something to really truly prove that it's you. So again, it heightens the level of security and due to the number of breaches and how easily it is to intercept a password and all these different things. Multi-factor is truly the way to moving forward. So we can't forget about physical security either. What good is the firewall and the great anti-spam software and the virus software, all this training? Well, what good is that if you leave the front door unlocked and someone can simply walk in and walk out with all of your information tucked under their arm? So we need to be mindful of physical security as well. A lot of times physical security is one of those things where you don't want it to be hidden. You want it to be out there saying, hey, look, we have video surveillance. That's why there's the alarm placards in the front yard or on windows, things like that, where they're deterrent. So if I'm an intruder and I'm going to try to break into an organization and steal their data or their equipment, things like that, and I see these video cameras and the alarm stickers on the windows and the sign in the front yard, you know what, I might move on to that building next door that maybe doesn't have those things. So again, just something to be mindful of, that security is all-encompassing. We just don't do one thing, or we just don't focus in one area. We try to do a good amount from all the different areas where we may be vulnerable. So when we're done using our technology, we need to make sure we dispose of it properly. This not only involves taking it to a recycling center to make sure is environmentally disposed of properly, but also to make sure we don't have any data on it. So no sensitive data left over on the hard drive itself. So there's traditionally two different ways that you can go about doing this. Sanitizing, which is wiping the hard drive in a way that it can be repurposed, or degaussing, which is essentially magnets and electricity that destroy the hard drive. So it's impossible to be recovered. Quick little safety note here: while it could be stress relieving, shooting the hard drive in the backyard is not a method in which we can ensure the data is destroyed. But it can be a whole lot of fun. So again, just to be mindful, whenever we're done with our tech, we need to make sure that there is no data left behind. This not only applies to things like USB drives, hard drives within your computer, but think of other things like your copier or your fax machine, where these print jobs or fax jobs or scan documents are going in and being stored on a hard drive on a printer or copier. So those things we also need to be mindful of in terms of making sure they're disposed of properly. Maintenance is very important for IT systems. So just like regularly getting an oil change and tire rotations is for your car to improve performance and make sure it's running properly, maintenance helps ensure your IT systems are running properly and ideally securely. So things like security patches, they're being released every day. It's making sure those types of things are applied to ensure your systems are less vulnerable. There's all kinds of third-party patches. There's network device firmware updates and patches. And then there's other types of maintenance tasks that are essentially just making sure things are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're running the way you expect them to run. So making sure your antivirus is working properly, that it's updating regularly, that it's scanning regularly, things like that. We test our backup and disaster recovery plans at a minimum once a year. Again, that's a maintenance task to ensure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So again, maintenance is one of those top items for us that is very, very critical, because there's so many different vulnerabilities that are resolved and things that are caught maybe before they turn really bad that can be done during maintenance. All right, so now we are going to shift gears and we are going to talk a little bit about protecting mobile devices. So these are going to be devices such as laptops, smartphones, things like that. All laptops should be encrypted. This is very important whether the laptop leaves the organization or not, simply because the laptop can so easily leave an organization. So we need to be mindful of theft, not only from employees, but potentially even visitors, patients, customers, whoever could maybe see that laptop sitting somewhere and kind of walk out the front door with it. So what encryption does is it makes the data on it unreadable without the proper password. So again, all laptops should be encrypted whether they leave the organization on a regular basis or not. So we just talked about encryption to ensure that your data is protected in the event that a laptop happens to grow legs and walk out the front door. Being mindful of that, we also don't want to make it too easy for a laptop to be stolen. So we don't want to leave your laptop sitting on the passenger seat with the windows down while you run into Starbucks and grab a coffee. So laptops should be secured in the trunk. That way they're out of sight, out of mind, and someone walking down the street isn't tempted to kind of open your door, grab that laptop, and run. So this is something that's growing in popularity a little bit, wireless hacking, things like that. And to be honest, the typical user isn't truly going to be able to tell whether they're connecting to a rogue access point or not. So this is one of those things where we just want to be mindful that things like this exist, where people can try to put up fake wireless networks to entice you to connect to them for internet access, so they can try to intercept the data going back and forth. So you just want to be mindful that this type of attack exists, and that you should ensure that you're accessing information systems, especially remotely, securely. So many organizations will have VPNs and things like that, and different secure ways to connect to the corporate network while you're on the road. So again, just something to be mindful of. So other mobile devices, smartphones, tablets, Apple, Android, Windows, BlackBerry, whatever your flavor, treat it just like a computer. all the stuff we just talked about for keeping computers and IT systems secure applies to smartphones as well. Make sure you install the updates. Just like computers, vulnerabilities exist, the updates patch them. A lot of times they also add additional functionality. Enable encryption. Make sure your data is encrypted on that device because, again, smartphones are really easy to lose, misplace, or get stolen. Make sure you have a password on it. Don't just put in the 4-digit password that you use to access your money from the Mac machine. Pick something a little more challenging than that. A lot of phones nowadays have fingerprint recognition for logins, and now the facial recognition. So you can pick a longer or more complex password because you don't have to enter it all the time because you're just putting your thumb down and getting right into your phone. Don't jailbreak your phone. Don't try to put on a different operating system or things like that to get around security measures that are in there. Don't download fake apps, and do some house cleaning. If you're not using an app anymore, just get rid of it. Not only does it free up space, but if there is a vulnerability found in that app and you're not using it, so you're not updating it, then you're introducing a potential risk onto your device. So again, treat mobile devices just like you would your computer or your laptop. So I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch our security awareness and training video. This is the closing slide we use whenever we present this live, and I thought it fitting for the online version as well, because we talk about our top 5. So the Q&A at the end of a security awareness and training course, we often get questions about, hey, what are your top things? Because we know money doesn't grow on trees. So what are the top things we can do for our organization? So again, we want to close with our top 5. So number 1, backup and disaster recovery things. Bad things will happen. You need to be able to get your data back. Number 2, security awareness and training, what you just went through. A educated end user is a safer end user. We talked a little bit about regular maintenance a few slides ago. Very, very important because it patches known vulnerabilities. It keeps you safer. From a business perspective, we like to ensure that if you have that sensitive information, which most organizations do, that you have your cybersecurity policy in place to protect you in a worst case scenario type of event. And lastly, that we have a good firewall. If we're going to invest in one of the network security type of devices, then we always like to start with the firewall because that's your first line of defense against the internet. So again, wanted to thank you for your time, and I hope that you have a safe and happy computing day.